Welcome to Digital Marketing ROI, the podcast that connects marketing to your business's revenue and covers everything you need to know to stay up to date in this crazy digital marketing world.
Welcome to Digital Marketing ROI. I'm your host, Shannon Allen, and today my co-host is Ryan Arnold. Welcome, Ryan.
Yes, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, so Ryan is the sales director at Simpli.Fi, and to some of our listeners, they've heard me talk about Simpli.Fi many times. They are one of my favorite partners. We do all of our programmatic display campaigns. We do most of our OTT and video pre-roll. They've just been a partner. We were just talking about this now for, 11 years?
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
About that, yeah.
So why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit, kind of give a background on you and how you came to work for Simpli.Fi. I think we were saying today we've worked together now, we think since like 2019, 2018.
I define everything pre-COVID, post-COVID. It was definitely pre-COVID, and before that
I almost think it was 2018. I almost think that it was 2 years. So we're looking at now 6 years. So we're getting old.
Yes.
You've had babies since then. You were married. I think.
Right. Yes. A lot of stuff going on. But I have been with the company. It's actually tomorrow is my 8th year anniversary being with the organization. So I've seen us come a long way and grow. And it's been a very, very interesting ride. And we've had a lot of success.
We were talking, too, because Ryan is from the Chicago area. And so in South Bend, we're not that far. So, I mean, it probably took you, like 2
hours? But I'm glad we're doing this in person. Right. I think this will flow better. Will flow better.
Than it does on Zoom.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So we are going to talk about the streaming success, right? Streaming TV, what's kind of a success guide? I know that your company had put together something that I thought was really interesting, and we're going to kind of break that down. But tell us this. So you've been in marketing now with working with Simpli.Fi for over 8 years. What did you do prior to that? Prior to
being with Simpli.Fi, I worked for a company called Signal that was acquired by TransUnion, but the core product was an identity solution. So,
but in marketing?
In marketing, yeah. Utilizing a universal ID to corral all different pieces of marketing data.
It was about data, which brings you to Simpli.Fi.
Right.
The great, one of the reasons we really love working with Simpli.Fi is, they're kind of the one-stop show for us. You're the demand side, you're the supply side, you're the analyze side, right? That's what we've always really appreciated about this, and the depth of reporting. So on a side note, we met this morning, and Ryan joined us towards the end with the sales reps and the campaign team, and we were diving deep into reporting, and that's what we have found some of our most success with your group is how in depth we go with the reporting. How we can really tie it back to ROI.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to start with a statistic that I pulled off your latest piece of marketing that I thought was really interesting. It's called The Guide to Success When It Comes to Streaming TV. It says that we have now officially surpassed the 50% mark of viewership. So 51.2% of consumers are viewing their content through streaming TV versus 48.8% through linear TV. So when we say streaming, we are talking OTT, whatever platform you're on. But streaming TV, you and I have talked about this. It's just easier to call it that because we're all streaming, right?
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Right.
With that statistic in mind, Ryan, let's first just kind of talk about a basic question for our marketing directors or maybe our owners listening. So why streaming TV? I know it's a very basic question, but why streaming TV for some of these advertisers on what they're going to do?
Especially the numbers that you just laid out, pretty evident. This is an area that is worth investing in. It's the only way that you're going to reach a certain amount of people. So going beyond that, I think, outside of the fact that it is a growing opportunity to reach that audience, I think of, additional benefits mainly around efficiency at the end of the day, right? It's a lot easier to work with potentially one partner to activate a multi-market or a multi-state campaign as opposed to having to work with various
CBS affiliate, the NBC, the cable company.
Right. And, the flexibility in being able to turn things on and off real quick or switch out creative, that type of stuff is very easy to do when you are working through these type of platforms as opposed to kind of a disparate approach. And then after that, I think, ultimately the targeting, which is our background, right, in the programmatic space has always been an opportunity, but thinking about ways in which we can create a very relevant audience for the products and services that a brand might be wanting to promote, and also doing so in a way that's very cost effective, right? Not wasting these ad dollars,
right,
being able
because
to...
you don't have to choose and say, I'm going to have a cable buy.
Right. I'm
going to work with the local CBS station and the local ABC station. Oh, and by the way, I am working with Dish Network as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, you know, I do feel... This is maybe more of like a pie in the sky type feeling, but I do feel like it gives brands, smaller brands, local brands, more regional brands, the ability to create some equity, brand equity, right alongside some of the national brands. And
I think you actually have nailed something that we talk about a lot. I mean, we work with so many local businesses at FDS, and that is, for the first time, we tell them all, you know, that you are now able to compete better, you know, with the bigger brand stores. You are able to have a presence that you might not have been able to do in the past against them on a local, even just picking one channel. Now you're having to choose. I only want to be with ABC or Fox, right? But with streaming, it's opened up doors that we can go after a niche audience that we want to go after, but we have more options at our fingertips because of streaming TV.
Correct. You said it perfectly. I mean, even like going onto Pluto and watching, I kind of nerd out a little bit because this is the space that I live in, but just seeing all the brands that are advertising on Pluto, and then it gets me excited when I talk to an advertiser to say, hey, you know, you can be alongside the Burger Kings and you know, the GMCs.
Because they're on that,
that's where they're
OTT
at.
platform. It's funny you say Pluto, because for years when we first launched, you know, with you guys and partnered, I had a lot of my sales reps say, well, I never used Pluto TV, and that was probably 4 or 5 years ago. But the younger generation at the time was like, well, yeah, I know what Pluto is because I don't have to pay for it.
Right.
And now, move ahead, now we're in 2024, and I mean, they're doing Super Bowl commercials, and they're everywhere. Everybody knows who Pluto TV is.
Yeah, well, and the fact that, like, it's a Viacom company. I don't know if they acquired them or they built them from the ground up, but it's almost like, so that network understands that this is going to be
this
a
is
big...
the future.
Exactly,
yes.
right.
Yes.
So
because tell our listeners, who else does Viacom own?
They own MTV. They own, I mean, anybody. I mean, tons of stuff.
They own their own, you know, like Sinclair owns the CBS, and Viacom, if I had to look it up, I know I've known this in the past, but I don't think everybody knows that most of these bigger companies have figured out that streaming is the future, and they needed to really figure out, how do we, you know, come back to that. You know, it's the people that don't understand that Dish Network owns Sling TV, and Sling TV is their own. Yeah, you know, that's a great
their
example.
version.
That's their version. They had to do something because they couldn't just let everybody cancel their subscription to Dish, right?
Yeah,
they had to have something to make up that revenue.
Right.
All right. So one of the things that I really love working with Simpli.Fi and on our team as partners at FDS is that we hear a lot about on the subject of this podcast is return on investment, because I feel like you guys do such a good job of always trying to figure out what is our goal, what are we trying to achieve, and it's always ROI, right? You go deeper, you ask us those questions. So some of the success stories you often share with us really kind of help us resonate to some of our local businesses that maybe are struggling to understand how something like streaming TV can bring success when they're like, God, I can't, and I don't think I can do that. I don't know if I have the budget, that type of thing. Can you share maybe one or maybe two success stories of maybe some local clients that you've worked with through some of your partners that have success with streaming TV that we're trying to really achieve a specific goal?
Yeah, and you're smart to think about it from an outcome perspective, because I think if you don't, it's almost like you got to identify how they're going to be measuring success and then work backwards from that, because there's so many different ways and approaches that you can take when activating these type of campaigns. And understanding up front, is reach and frequency the goal, right? Are they wanting a low CPM, or is pricing what they're looking at? Or are they needing to deliver on certain quote-unquote brand-safe inventory channel, things like that, right? So yes, that's the approach that we take, and that's how we look at it. In terms of, like, you know, real-world examples, especially at the local level, right. A couple that come to mind, and I kind of want to focus this around almost bridging the gap between traditional TV, linear TV buying, and then how, you know, brands can think about it. Because most brands that are doing this today, that are running TV today, that's where they're running it. So I think it's a matter of helping them understand how can they get a better return on being able to implement.
And we're
these
not
strategies.
Always saying stop doing linear.
No,
we're not saying that at all. But we're also trying to keep the strategy open to know that there might be a better way in some cases.
perfect example. So what I was going to kind of call out was in working with like a political agency and a local politician, they had already invested a significant amount of money in their linear ad buy. Okay. And that wasn't going anywhere, right? They did know that they wanted to reach a younger demographic, and the only way to do that would be to utilize CTV, streaming. That's not the only way, but
it's
in all likelihood,
a major way.
Right,
exactly.
right. The only way you're going to reach people that cut the cord is via streaming. So the strategy that we put forth was actually utilizing our data to exclude households that have had cable subscriptions. Therefore, helping us understand that the people we are going to reach aren't the people that would have
already reaching.
They're not. They're already reaching. So because they were all worried about cannibalizing their own budget. So that was one. And
that's actually a really good example because political is right now top of mind, and knowing that you're seeing. If I'm watching something on linear TV right now, I can turn it off, right? But if I'm running over the top or connected TV and it's unskippable, I might not need as many impressions to get the same effect.
It's funny you bring that up because I always make sure to reiterate that when people are asking, what's the difference between 5,000 and 10,000? Like, well, obviously reach, right? And frequency, but more importantly, it's like when you're running CTV, it's non-skippable ads. So the complete rates are over 90%. So people are viewing your ad to completion, right? So that I think that's important to consider. And one of the reasons why people are willing to invest a little more into streaming versus pre-roll.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit earlier about some local businesses because I think the best thing about our listeners are a lot of local clients that we have, existing ones we already work with, or maybe a marketing director that's trying to figure out what's best for them. And we talked about the car industry just because it's, we have a lot of local dealers that still very much believe in linear TV. Do you have anything that kind of comes to mind with like a case study or a success that you've seen a local car dealer work with?
Yeah, so we don't want to totally throw in an entire new approach when it comes to targeting. Like especially for TV, I don't think necessarily you always need to find the most granular audience. The reason why people are doing TV in the first place is to reach its mass media,
masses.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and honestly, and I don't mean to interrupt, but the best thing I love about Simpli.Fi is we work with you is I have a local car dealer that is working, that believes in their linear TV, and I'm never encouraging them not to do that. But where I add a layer in is I'll use your curation tool, and we'll use addressable geofencing for video OTT, and we'll pull past Subaru owners that their lease is up or that they haven't bought a vehicle in the last 5 years. And then layer that into what they're already doing on linear.
Perfect example. And then taking it a step forward with streaming is looking at what's working for them from a traditional standpoint, right? And then being able to easily replicate that with streaming TV, but also, doing so, also providing more value in a way. And what I mean by that is not only are you going to be able to target with a little bit more definition around like a geography, right? So going as low as like a zip code versus an entire DMA, there's a benefit to that, but still retaining the ability to reach people who are zip codes, for instance, that have a higher propensity of people that make up a specific demo, whether that's age, gender, income, or, cord cutters, right? Optimizing the campaign towards zip codes that you are seeing a higher number of people who have cut the cord, right? It's helping you create a more efficient optimizations around delivery so that you can achieve, an ideal, effective CPM while still being able to reach the same audience that you're hitting. Quote unquote through.
I love that you brought up the geography part about it, because if you take everything else off the table when it comes to streaming, the biggest thing I probably have heard in complaints in the past has been when I work with a car dealer that might have 10 locations, let's say, in a large DMA or multiple DMAs, and they get forced into a buy. Each location gets forced to pay, but yet they have nobody in who comes to them in their DMA that they're buying from.
Right.
So where OTT really comes in and streaming TV is that we can say to this Mr. Car Dealer, out of the 10 groups, I can just make sure that your area has your commercial running. Yeah. So, I mean, that's an ability with streaming TV that linear just doesn't offer.
Right. Off the bat, that's efficiency.
Like, take targeting out of it.
Take targeting out of it.
That's still worth it.
Right. And that's without even getting into the reporting and everything. And so it's like, I think you're right. I think it's understanding what they're already doing and working with them to determine a plan that is going to help raise the effectiveness of all channels, right? So, radio, right? What can we do to create a strategy to complement what you're doing with radio already and things like that?
Yep, which is what we always try to promote as well on the show, is that I don't want 100% of somebody's budget to live in digital, because the consumer journey isn't only digital. We know it's a huge part of it, but there's multiple layers that traditional still has so many benefits.
Exactly. Right.
All right. So when it comes to OTT or CTV, it's really one of the few programmatic products that we work with that inventory and device delivery are really more important than ever before, right? So we know that both are all about following the consumer journey, but with streaming TV, really when it comes down to the value of, let's say, premium, and we could really talk what premium is. You and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, but premium inventory and the device you're delivering on. So if we talk about devices first and foremost, I can be delivered on my phone with streaming. I can be delivered on the connected TV, which is large screen. I mean, if you really look at those two as the top pieces, that inventory. Yes, we can go into the gaming, and you have your tablets. I mean, we have multiple deliveries, but if we just say your large screen or your small screen, sometimes I'd like to just kind of break it down. Yep. And then premium inventory, I kind of want to dig in a little bit about that when it comes to strategy. So can we talk a little bit about what Simpli.Fi might offer in terms of that premium inventory maybe and delivery, and how that can affect a campaign and how you think of it? Like, there's so much strategy that we can do, and we talked a little bit in the meeting today about some really cool ideas. But can you kind of touch with our listeners on that when it comes to what they might think of as premium inventory?
Right. Like you said, I think we both agree that there are various definitions of quote-unquote premium, right? I do feel like inventory is fairly commoditized, right? If you're willing to pay a certain price point, you can deliver where you want to deliver, right? So the way I look at it is it's more important at understanding from a advertiser's perspective, how do we meet their expectations? So understanding either what they qualify to be premium versus maybe what they don't, or maybe what they consider not to be brand safe, or maybe certain content that they don't want their ads to deliver against. So yeah, that's more of a conversation that you may need to have. Clearly we can offer recommendations, but look, from my standpoint, I believe the consumer data is what makes the inventory premium, right?
It's still the journey.
Yeah, right. But taking that aside, looking at it from purely a content perspective, yeah, there's a lot of things that we can offer. And you think about, just for example, like Vanderpump Rules. I got into that a couple years ago.
Thank your wife for it.
Yeah, right. And now I'm obsessed. But
me too.
Taking that as an example, right, you can consume that show across many different providers, streaming services, call it what you want, right? So if you have someone that's just looking to reach that content, right, there's many ways to do that. So I think what we've done, and other companies as well, is provide more or less a menu, right? Or options to help advertisers understand where they want to devote their spend. That can be as broad as no targeting and serve everywhere, all the way to we have the ability to set a minimum budget that we're willing to apply to full delivery across one channel or one type of programming, right? And I think ultimately with streaming, the majority of the campaigns are going to live in the middle there. Again, with a focus on understanding the outcome, right? What is the client looking to achieve? Are they looking to reach a large amount of people at a lower price point? Or are they, is it a B2B advertiser that is only looking at reaching a very specific audience? So they're willing to pay the additional fees to add data in order to reach 100% of that audience. So I think giving them that choice is very important. And in terms of like helping drive those outcomes, we obviously have a lot of data to kind of back up the fact that certain programming will lead to better results. Maybe it is gaming, maybe it's not gaming sites, maybe it's news content, maybe it's not. So I think there does have to be a degree of testing for every brand, but a lot of that's already in place, right? A lot of that stuff we've already worked through.
It kind of sounds like, and I do agree with this, we don't want to get our clients that we work with, we try not to get hung up on the strategy needs to come from what your ultimate goal is, not that you're running on Peacock or Bravo when it comes to Vanderpump Rules. I mean, that's an example. Like, it still comes strategy first. We want to reach as many people as we can. And by the way, I can watch Vanderpump Rules on multiple different OTT platforms, right? They're different content platforms. So I want to reach them whatever part of that journey is. So what I'm hearing from you, and I do love that you're talking about this, premium inventory is great. I know I can go to Simpli.Fi and you have all the premium inventory that I want. But ultimately, if you don't have the tactics to target, the geography to track, to put a circle around a geofencing, if I don't have the reporting that tells me what's going on with that, we watch that video to completion, that stuff isn't there either. It doesn't matter if they're running it on Roku, Peacock, Hulu. It doesn't matter if I'm not getting the other results and there's not strategy involved.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that even to just kind of call out another tactic, if you will, but a strategy is even looking at ways that you can layer on retargeting off of people that have viewed those ads, right?
Absolutely.
So it can almost make a campaign, you can double your effectiveness and even reduce your cost per conversion or cost per acquisition if you're able to layer in potentially sequential messaging with display or maybe pre-roll video.
Exactly.
Right?
And I like that you brought that up. I mean, we're talking about, kind of the success of streaming, but half of our success comes from using all of our solutions, putting the pieces of the puzzle together so that there's nice layers. And that's streaming. We have the ability now that we've never had before.
Yeah, but making sure that you're also transparent in how you report on that, right? Because I think that advertisers expect, especially if they're putting forth a certain budget, X amount of those impressions to go to a large screen environment, right?
Yes.
So we want to make sure that when we do provide, a wrap-up report at the end, the client can clearly identify X amount went here, X amount went to display, just so they're aware of kind of what we're...
That's actually a really good segue about reporting. So for really my last question, and if you've listened to the podcast, you know that because it's digital marketing ROI, we always ask the ROI question, right? What's our return on investment? So one of the best things I said earlier was the reporting we get working with you as a partner. So let's talk about the reporting of streaming TV and what we are able to see in the data after a campaign has run and how that would tie back to a customer's ROI.
We offer a tremendous amount of insight, lots of metrics, right? And I think, again, this goes back to understanding, what are the metrics that the client's going to be looking at the end of the day and focusing on how we optimize to performing in those areas. So from a reporting standpoint, you're going to get all of your domain level reporting, right? Showing you where the ad served, how many impressions, time of day, device type, things like that. We also have the ability to utilize other insight, whether that's reporting dashboards focused around Lyft or even third parties that are that either clients may be prone to use or just through our integrations utilizing a third party like an iSpot to help kind of provide additional validation that the campaigns that we're running are working. Clearly, you can track everything like you would in a normal campaign environment. Offline visits, online sales, things like that. But, you do got to be mindful of the fact that with connected TV, you may lose some visibility, right? Because not everybody's taking their smart TV off of the wall and walking into a brick and mortar location. So I think as long as you're mindful of that and kind of how you're structuring your approach, I think you'll be okay. But, also something we kind of hit on earlier today is even, finding ways to utilize offline POS data and tying that back potentially to campaigns. So there's a lot of work that we've done to identify the effectiveness, because at the end of the day, I think digital, like no other, your feet are to the fire, right? People are expecting
higher
results.
Expectations of results.
Right. And that's because we can report on results, right? So you need to be mindful of that. So I think there needs to be some time taken up front to identify what's valuable. The other thing that I think is, and this is, I guess, probably more so on the, maybe even on the front end, is some of the reports that we've rolled out around ACR data that we can see that helps with not only prospecting, because it shows all of the different advertisers that are running within a given market.
And ACR stands for?
Automatic content recognition. Okay. So it's virtually every, I don't want to say every impression because it doesn't get everything, but all impressions, whether streaming or linear, that come across the glass, right? Which refers to comes across the screen, right? And so what this data does is it allows us to see the percentages of makeup within a DMA, or even at a zip code level, for instance, of how many of those impressions are going to linear versus streaming. Right? And then within that, the makeup of a zip code, right? How many of these households meet a certain criteria when it comes to demo, whether that's income or age or whatever.
What does that look like? And is this their target audience that we're seeing? Is it what they thought it was? Right.
Or even like looking at like, hey, these are the most popular channels, most viewed channels within this region, right? So, and that almost kind of helps us communicate back when you're looking at a report, you're validating, hey, we're running the same channels that are also, the top viewed programs within an area, it just lends to some credence to what you're doing.
Sometimes I think we overcomplicate it as well. And one of my favorite metrics when it comes to what Simpli.Fi has done for us is what we call it a website view through. I've heard it called, just website conversion. But it's that we know we've delivered the ad, and within 30 days, the consumer went back to the website, right? Let's think about how we watch TV, how we're consuming content anymore when we're doing streaming TV. My phone is always next to me. So I'm watching large screen, right? I'm on the connected, I'm on my smart TV, I'm watching something, a commercial comes up because I have to watch it, and I think, ooh, I'm typing it right into my phone, and guess what? I can track that going back to my client and say, look, this many people that watched your commercial actually went back within 30 days to your website and looked you up.
Right.
We didn't always get that with linear TV.
Correct. That's a perfect example, right, of another thing that we can, it's trackable.
It's trackable. And so even if we can talk about, there's so many different ROIs we can talk about, there's things now with streaming TV that can show us a higher return on investment than I was ever able to show a client through linear. Again, not saying there's not a huge value, but I can't always measure it the same way I feel that I can measure the streaming.
Correct.
Well, this has been fun.
Likewise. This is great.
It was good conversation. I'll have to have you back again. So don't worry. I'm going to
2 hours away, and I drive fast. So
we'll do the drive again. Next time I'll take you out we'll have a beer. Okay?
For sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm Shannon Allen, your host, and you're listening to Digital Marketing ROI.
You've been listening to Digital Marketing ROI from Federated Digital Solutions. Do you have an idea for a future episode or a burning digital marketing question? Text ROI to 45364 to get a link where you can share your idea. Subscribe to get new episodes every other Thursday, plus Tip Tuesday insights every week.
Podcasts by Federated Media.